think we recognize that there is respect for the band, and I think a lot of it comes from the fact that we've been together for 33 years or whatever it is. That we've managed in a business where it's notoriously short-lived. We've managed to maintain our beliefs, and our standards throughout this whole period. We've worked very hard to do things the way we believe it should be done. We've been loyal and true to our music, to our art, and that's a difficult thing to do in the music business.
5 years is a long time to be away in this business. But when you're Canada's longest-running, most successful band, selling over 35 million albums since your 1974 debut, the fans will wait. Now, Rush followers gave the band the time they needed to recuperate from personal tragedies. The result of that wait, the brand new disc, Vapor Trails. We recently caught up with two of the Rush co-founders, Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson, at their management office here in Toronto. This is the story of Rush. First show was 1968, I believe. One of the mics was a floor lamp.
Yeah. Yeah, it was one of those. Yeah, it was one of those old electro-voiced mics. The big chrome ones with the little on-off switch in the bottom.
No mics then.
We had it taped to a lamp because we had no mics then.
Yeah, that's good research.
One amp. Both of us plugged into the same amp.
Do you remember how much you
My
made?
amp.
Did you get paid?
$10.
We had enough so we could go to the delicatessen.
We
and
went to
get chips with
Panzer's.
gravy afterwards.
Yeah.
And that was like awesome.
But I remember that night. I remember sitting in the restaurant and feeling on top of the world. It was so exciting. It was our first paid gig, $10.
For that.
Yeah, for that.
Yeah, we did a gig. We got paid. We were professional musicians.
When you did Toronto in January, you sold out 3 shows at the Gardens. Did you ever expect to do that in Toronto when you started?
Oh, no, of course not. You just sort of start and hope you go where you go. You really don't think in that concrete term. You think of the fact that I'd like to do well, and that's about it. You don't really know what well is. You don't know how to define that word. You just sort of go for it.
Each must know his want to sow a new mentality closer to the heart. Yes, closer to the heart. Yeah.
Rush's first gig happened in September 1968, shortly after forming in Toronto. The band was comprised of guitarist Alex Lifeson, vocalist and bassist Geddy Lee, and drummer John Rutsey. Their self-titled debut was released in 1974, at which time Rutsey exited to be replaced by drummer Neil Peart. Peart would go on to assume the role of the band's primary lyricist.
It was such a different time. It was the early 70s, and we were quite young. We were just a bar band. It was a very exciting time at that level. To have a record was really a big deal. It was very difficult to get anybody interested in us, and that's why we ended up financing the record ourselves and through management. And I remember, getting the first copy and playing it and thinking, wow, I played on this. I was a part of this.
But really, we just did what we did. There was no great master plan, and there'd never been. It's like we're starting to write this coming Monday, and none of us know what the hell we're going to write. We just get together, and everybody's a little anxious, and something comes out. And that's really the way we've always worked.
To seek the sacred river out, to walk the caves of ice, to break my fast on honeydew and drink the milk of paradise.
It's kind of naive. It's like naive painting in a way, and folk art in a way. Their approach to art is what our approach was to music. We didn't really know what we were doing. It was all kind of gut.
I mean, we've failed a lot in public, too. I mean, not all of our experiments work.
Absolutely.
And I think that's part of it. I think the sad thing about the industry is that and I guess understandable from that point of view, it's so success-oriented, and now it's been capsulized where bands have no time to get successful. They have no time to learn. It's like they're sending the message saying, well, you can't learn at this level. You have to learn in the minor league level or whatever you want to call it. But we're not going to give you the opportunity to learn on the job. Part of what was so great about the era that we came through, and I don't know whether it was because of us or the period of time or whatever, we had the latitude to fail in public. Not all our records were successful, and not all of them achieved what we wanted to achieve, but for some reason or another, whether it was our insistence or the conditions of our recording lives, that we were able to learn a lot. And so much, you learn way more from your failures than you ever do from your successes. And I think that reflects why there are not so many bands that stick around so long. They're not given that opportunity to fail. They fail and they're gone.
When they turn the pages of history, when these days have passed long ago, will they read of us with sadness for the seeds that we let grow?
You know, these writers tell you that, well, prog rock is coming back. It's so big in Europe now. And I'm like, okay, whatever. You know, I've never put myself in that cat. I never thought of us like that. You know, we are a hard rock band that sometimes wanders off into the world of the proggers. And, you know, so we share some of the desire to make our music weird, which the prog rockers all had in common. But aside from that, that's where the comparisons end, I think. I consider us carrying on a tradition begun by the Cream or the Who, more than anything.
Well, you know, it's a funny thing, progressive rock, because it's an easy thing to poo-poo, you know, it's an easy thing to make fun of, because, you know, because a lot of the progressive bands try to be overtly intelligent sounding or intellectual. Listen, you know, it's like, look at our arrangements, they're complex. Listen to our lyrics, they're, you know, worldly and spacey and so forth. Our genre of music, you know, doesn't, you know, have any kind of corner, you know, doesn't corner the market on intelligence, you know, music is music. Some of it's good, some of it's vacuous, some of it's, you know, more intricate. So, you know, I think over time that whole aspect of things have been played down by us, certainly. You know, and, you know, we just are interested in writing good music and hoping that what we have to say in our songs has some meaning to somebody.
Still to come on the story of Rush.
You know, Canadian people have elevated us to some sort of, you know, stature worthy of being interviewed, I guess. But in many countries of the world, we are still kind of a cult band in a way.
In time. Living in the limelight, the universal dream for those who wish to see.
You figured over 2,000 interviews throughout the career. I don't know what the exact number is. It's up there after over 30 years. But Rush to me was never an overkill.
No.
Yeah, you were prolific in terms of the records, but there was never a time where people got sick of them.
No, we were never a mainstream band, really.
Yeah.
I mean, the most mainstream profile we have is in Canada, strictly because of our success abroad and the fact that, you know, we've been able to stay living here. And you know, the Canadian people have decided that that's worth something and have elevated us to some sort of, you know, stature worthy of being interviewed, I guess. But in many countries of the world, we are still kind of a cult band in a way, because we don't have huge pop success, although we have, you know, in a rock sensibility, we have obviously garnered success. We can do well as a touring act, and we sell records and all that. But because we're not a band like Bryan Adams or, you know, it's bam, bam, bam out there in the mainstream, I don't think we've been overcooked in those media areas.
Our lives were getting very confused, and there was photographers around, and this and that and the other, and it just didn't feel right. You know, we felt in a wrong situation, and we felt it was endangering our existence as a band. So we had to, you know, get a little more insular, which is dangerous because you cut yourself off from life when you do that. You cut yourself off from the street, and you cut yourself off from experiencing other things. That we've been kind of an anti-image band, but not really militantly, I guess. It's kind of been accidentally an anti-image band, which is in the end come around to be our image to a certain degree. That's kept us away from a lot of the kind of lifestyle press, and it's kind of put us off in a more quiet place.
What you say about his company is what you say about society. Catch the myth, catch the mystery, catch the drift.
What makes us unique? Now, the fact that we're a trio that sounds somewhat like an orchestra at times, I think makes us unique. I think just a strange combination of influences. The fact that we are a hard rock band sometimes, but we're not afraid to bring other rhythmic influences like reggae or whatever. The fact that there almost always seems to be a conceptual, lyrical tone that's quite different than most bands that are playing harder rock music.
They're not for simple-minded people at all.
What makes this band different from any other band?
The writing style.
It's because of the intelligence in her lyrics. They're for the mind. I mean, they're not like any other band. They don't sing about the same old average everyday stuff, you know. They seem to touch deeper.
And I know when I bring in lyrics, I have that same sense of vulnerability. I've been slaving for 3 days on something. I don't have any objectivity about it, but it's what I spent 3 days of my life on it. So if the other guys respond to it by saying, yes, you know, I see what you're after here, but you might be able to get at a little clearer by trying this or this. And to me, that becomes the most positive thing, more than just the affirmation of they like what I've done. They've added something to it that excites me, so I'll go back to the drawing board saying, yeah, it's going to be even better now. So it becomes what could have been a negative situation, what could have been a big argument and a fight in some bands, in our situation becomes a positive thing, where I go back more excited for the input that they've put into it.
You never seem to write, and how come you guys don't contribute more songs lyrically?
Well, you know, we don't talk so good. Like, talk for yourself.
Alex and I prefer to spend more time on music. It's what moves us.
So it comes down to a lot of times when we're working on writing, we'll split up, and the two of them will go together and work on music while I work on lyrics. It's just a matter of facility, really. I have a facility with words that I don't have with notes, and they have it with notes. It's a good balance.
One thing about Neil, he's a consummate professional. He's such a pleasure to work with, and over the years, he's been increasingly more concerned with my ability to put emotion into what he writes. So we go back and forth right up until the final take of a song. We're constantly rewriting little things.
The world weighs on my shoulders, but what am I to do? Yes, sometimes drive me crazy, but I worry about you. I know it makes no difference to what you're going through, but I see the tip of the iceberg, and I worry about you.
A lot of people don't care about lyrics, and they don't have to. Again, I don't think that's important. The important thing is that they are affected by the music, and if they like it, that's fine. Need never pay any attention to the lyrics except as sounds. And I have to think of that, too. When I'm writing lyrics, there are sounds that have to be sung, and I think of them just in a purely euphonious way. It just has to be a nice-sounding series of syllables. And then if I can get an interrelation of rhythm in there that satisfies me as a craftsman, and then if I can get some other symbolism in there that might be even just personal, that will just make me happier with it.
I hear the sound of gunfire at the prison gate. I remember it here. Do I hope or do I fear for my father and my brother? It's too late, but I must help my mother stand up straight. Are we the last ones left alive? Are we the only human beings to survive?
Rush has always been very sponge-like in terms of influences. You know, there are people that have tried to be... I remember Ray Davies made a quote years ago that he never listened to any other music because he was afraid he'd be influenced by it. And I think the course of his career bears out the falseness of that presumption. I think it's important to be influenced. Obviously not to the point of imitation, but just to know what's going on and to respond to it if it's useful to you, to experiment with it. And Rush as a band, we've always done our experimenting in public, as it were.
Does it happen?
So if I bring in a song, however bizarre it is, same in Roll the Bones when I brought in the rap section.
Jack, relax, get busy with the facts.
It was a bizarre thing to do, but lyrically it was something I wanted to try because I kept hearing the better rap writers have a lot of fun with the internal rhymes and the wordplay and all that.
Abstraction can't give you no satisfaction for the facts. You better run them, or facts are fact for no one.
I'd really like to try that. But at the same time, bringing it to the other guys, I was like, well, what are we going to do with a rap piece? You know, it was a strange stone to drop on them, but at the same time, they were open enough to say, well, okay, let's play with this.
I
think we recognize that there is respect for the band, and I think a lot of it comes from the fact that we've been together for 33 years or whatever it is. And that we've managed in a business where it's notoriously short-lived.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you've also said no to a lot of things along the way, where you could have said yes, and a lot of bands would have said yes too.
Yeah, very true.
I mean, there were times in our career, of course, that we could have done certain things, like we always get asked to do these television shows where you perform late night TV and stuff like that, which we always thought was kind of bogus for a band like us. And I still think it's true. Bands rarely sound, real rock bands that play hard music rarely sound good in those situations.
And dropping a bridge or a verse because you got to keep it to 3 minutes.
You keep it to 3 minutes, and you can't sing these words, these 8 words. And, so I don't know. We just decided to pass on a lot of that stuff, and you know, it probably cost us some mainstream exposure. But at the end of the day, it felt right.
Yeah.
And we've always, good or bad, smart or stupid, I don't know. We've just kind of flown by the seat of our pants with a lot of those decisions.
Rush's initial American breakthrough occurred in 1976 with the release of 2112, their first million-selling album.
Chosen to stay in Canada. Was there pressure in the early days to head south of the border?
It's not pressure. The only pressure is pressure you create for yourself. You know, to stay in a country where you're more severely taxed than in other countries. You know, there's opportunities elsewhere, and there's other places to live and other lifestyles to lead. And you know, we're pretty well, all fairly well-adjusted middle-class guys that liked living here and decided just to stay because it's a great place to raise children. You know, they're not normal decisions that most guys in rock bands make, but it's kind of who we are.
Yeah, that's where we come from. You know, we are very normal kind of middle-class guys with middle-class values, a good work ethic, and to us, what we do is just what we do, and it's not really that special. It's just the thing that we're lucky enough to do. So it's a big hoopla made. I mean, isn't that such a typical Canadian attitude?
He's such a nice Canadian boy, that Alex Lifeson, isn't he? Your mother would be proud of you.
Thank you very much.
And he even says
Did I say thank you?
Yeah, you did. He said thank you.
When you first started out, the Canadian music industry didn't have Time Fleet. And now you're the biggest rock and roll band in Canada. Do you feel bitter about that? Or how do you feel about it?
It just doesn't matter. It feels good to be. You have to say, I think it feels good to be right. Other than that, there's no resentment or bitterness.
Oh,
I don't care.
Who cares about those fools?
Give me another drink.
I mean, it's kind of petty to dwell on it. It was just the way the industry was at the time, I mean, it wasn't any different for any other band that was playing at the time, We just happened to be very fortunate and to have a management company that could push us in another direction when Canada said no and the United States said yes. So, I mean, every musician working in Canada has experienced the same thing for sure. It's just the way the industry was at the time in this country. We had a very strong following in Toronto. We played all the bars endlessly. We had a good bunch of drunks following us around, I guess. But when we cracked America, we got the rest of Canada to come along.
Is that part of the Canadian psyche?
I think it's hometown psyche. I think it's the same is true if you're from Holland or wherever you're from. I think once you've come back, you're viewed differently. They take you more seriously than, they've grown up with you, so it can't be any good he lives here, I like being from Canada. I like living in Canada. Of all the cities I've been to, Toronto is, I think, one of the finest to live in, and I'll always feel that way until I find another one.
The 1990 Rush was declared Canada's Group of the Decade by the Canadian Academy of Recording Arts and Sciences. They were also inducted into the Juno Hall of Fame in 1994.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the latest members to the Juno Hall of Fame. Neil Peart, Alex Lifes, and Geddy Lee. Rush!
Thank you. We are honored tonight by the Canadian music industry, and to us, this industry includes the drivers who carry us through darkness and bad weather to the next show, the guys on the crew who set it up and tear it down, the record company rep who gets our song on the radio, or the fan who introduces a friend to our music for the first time.
I'm very happy I've stayed in this country all these years. It's a great country to work out of.
I think we recognize that there is respect for the band, and I think a lot of it comes from the fact that we've been together for 33 years or whatever it is, and that we've managed in a business where it's notoriously short-lived. We've managed to maintain our beliefs, and our standards throughout this whole period. We've worked very hard to do things the way we believe it should be done. We've been loyal and true to our music, to our art, and that's a difficult thing to do in the music business. And I think there is a level of respect from all different areas, from the business itself and from fans and from other bands and even people that don't particularly like our music. They see that there is a way to do things your own way and be successful and be true and honest with yourself.
Get up, guys! Get up, get up! Okay, thank you! Pick it up! Pick it up! Yeah! Rush rule!
We have such a diverse following. I don't know how many fans told me that the first concert they ever saw was Rush. So it's one thing to say that you're not dependent on your fan base, but it's another thing to know that every time you go in the studio, there's a group of people out there that are passionately interested in what you're doing. That really helps give you reasons to keep going.
In 1977, there was an interview in Cream magazine, and I think the writer asked you, what's been the key to Rush's success at this point? And Geddy said, perseverance. That was 77.
77?
Yeah.
Well, I was about 6 years old.
Nothing's changed. I don't think.
Yeah?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, it's easier to persevere, obviously, when you have a huge fan base that we have. So,
yeah.
I mean, I don't think you can belittle the contribution that our fans have made to our being able to persevere, It's one thing to say you stuck it out. I mean, hell, they've been so willing to put up with our experiments on vinyl and now on those stupid little things. You have to accept that as, when you're making a record, of course you make it for yourself and you make it to get off on it, and you want to feel good about what you're doing. You know, you want to prove to yourself in some way that you're getting better and you've found some new twist on writing or playing. But you have to credit a fan base with giving you the confidence to do that in some way.
We're a band that's been around for a long time, and touring has been a part of the whole Rush scene for all these years since the beginning. And we'll keep doing it so long as we can do it in such a way that we enjoy it.
Ever frustrating to know that the recorded side, there was limited airplay, but as far as the live entity of Rush is concerned, everyone stopped to take notice?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, certainly early on, when we first were out there, it was almost impossible to get airplay. In fact, I remember it was in the late 70s, a very clever A&R guy, national promotion guy from Mercury Records at the time, put a special sampler disc together called Everything You Wanted to Play by Rush But Were Afraid to. And he had like 10 of our songs on it and sent it around to all these radio stations. And it, you know, it actually did start changing things. And then there was a period, you know, a few years later where suddenly we became kind of a staple on American rock radio. So it really turned around, but it turned around, as you suggest, as a result of how much success we've had as a touring act and the reputation we had as a touring act.
We're very much a live band, and we love touring and we love playing, so...
Yeah, it's a lot of fun to play.
You know, to sit around and just make albums would get kind of boring after a while, I think, for us. I think the thing that's enabled us to endure for all these years is the fact that there's something in our music that still appeals to younger people. And the younger people keep coming out. I don't know how many times I've had kids come up to me and say, this is the first show I've been to, which floors me.
But the audience was such a mix of 14, 15, 16-year-old kids, as well as 38, 40, 45-year-olds. We have great fans, and I think they've grown up in a lot of cases with us, and now that they've grown up, they bring their kids. So, so we have a very wide variety of fans in age groups, definitely.
Still to come on the story of Rush.
So I think this many years down the road, we're again learning new things about each other, which is pretty amazing when you think about it.
Up in this band. I look at being in a band differently than a lot of musicians do, because a lot of musicians become musicians, go play around, and then join a band, you know. I joined a band and grew up in it.
Our peers, as it were, who are our audience in many cases, I look out there and see guys who are as old as we are, so they must have grown up with us and gone to school with us, and then they went out and got married and had jobs, and we became the soundtrack of their lives. And in most times when a piece of music is important to you, it represents something, and even if you hear it 10 years later, it brings alive that whole period of your life for you, and it truly is the soundtrack for that era.
Let's get this signed. Thank you very much, Getty. It's a pleasure. Thank you very much.
The amount of smiles coming from these people walking away after they got their disc signed, some of them were shaking. Do you understand it?
I understand enough of it, I think. What I understand is that at some point in their lives, our music has made a connection. And in a lot of ways, it's usually a healing connection or an inspiring connection. And that has stayed with them. And in some way, it has made such a bond with what we do. And because I think when you combine that with the fact that we're not really a mainstream band, and in some ways, in their mind, we're always kind of fighting the good fight out there, it's made them very loyal and made them appreciate what we do. So I'm eternally grateful to them for giving us the opportunity to continue to do this.
There's no question that we've been an influence in terms of kind of progressive rock that's tied to hard rock music. And it seems that a lot of the hard rock guitarists, in particular, and drummers, I guess, that are in the slightly more offside bands have been influenced by us.
Metallica, Dave Grohl, Billy Corgan, Radiohead, and many others have gone on record as citing Rush as a primary influence.
I don't know what that means, that we've created a monster out there, or what. Or maybe that we've just provided an alternative to slick hard rock and roll.
Individually, you've all won awards for your instruments. To have a drummer or a bass player or guitar player be known as the best in Canada, and they're all in the same band, I'm thinking is a pretty amazing feat. But do you ever surprise yourself, like when Alex is doing stuff in the studio? Do you forget how good he is?
Yeah, well, we take each other for granted, for sure.
Yeah, but
that's part of it.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, I think at this stage there's more acceptance of our abilities, and I think we have an inherent respect. I mean, Alex has done a lot of stuff on his own in the last few years, too, producing and writing on his own. And when I've heard some of that stuff, it's remarkable.
Alex Lifeson released a solo project called Victor in 1996.
With Victor, it was something that I needed to do more on a personal level than anything. I really needed to apply myself and work very hard. Tend to get lazy, and that was something that really forced me to, get my nose to the grindstone. And I had 3 weeks off before we started working on Test for Echo. Same thing basically with Ged. He worked on his record for over a year, and then finished, did all his promo and press, insanity, and then basically within a week or two was in the studio again working on this record. And I could see what he brought to it was really from his experience being in charge of his own project and all that comes with it. It's a huge responsibility.
Geddy Lee would offer up a solo disc in 2000, My Favorite Headache.
I learned a lot making this record, and the more I got into making the record, the more I realized how beneficial it is for me to do this. I learned a lot about myself as a writer, and I was able to express myself as a lyricist for the first time in a long time, and develop that past the point of being embarrassed about it. And that opened up a whole other realm of creative expression for me that I really can't underestimate.
There's an overwhelming tone of people not being surprised that you did a solo record, but more so that they're surprised it took 30 years for someone to do a solo record.
Yeah, well, I guess it's one of those things that when a band's been together for a while, it's just expected that the routine solo effort will be released eventually. But which is one of the reasons I was never interested in doing one. I never had the typical frustration that a lot of, guys have in a rock band. And it's been a particularly amenable 25 years with my partners, so I don't harbor the same, resentment, frustration that a lot of these guys have.
What I experienced in the way he worked coming off his record, to me, was much the same way that I felt after I finished Victor.
It's true what he says. You learn a lot when you step outside.
Yeah,
you learn about what the guys brought to the table, and you learn about expressing yourself more clearly in some way and getting more in tune with what you want to do. Now, there's no guarantee, and this is where a lot of bands break up, that once you've had that experience and you go back in a group situation, that what you've learned may not fit anymore, or you may not be willing to compromise it. But it wasn't the case with us, I think. And I don't know why that was, other than the experience on our own made us appreciate each other better. He doesn't like to do what's obvious, ever. He likes to do something in a completely unusual way, and he has to feel that there's something fresh, there's a new angle on it. Even though he may end up in the more direct approach, he has to go through a process to do that. And sometimes in the past I haven't been very patient with that, or appreciated how important that could be.
Both ways.
And now I think I do appreciate that aspect of what he does. And, so I think this many years down the road, we're, again, learning new things about each other, which is pretty amazing when you think about it.
We get along very well. We're good friends. We spend 85% of our time laughing, and I think that's pretty important.
We are good friends, and we like what we do. And those two things seem to be enough.
Geddy and I have been friends since we were 13, and we've grown up together in so many ways.
It's driven by friendship, and respect for each other, I think. That's without question. If we didn't like each other, it'd be easier not to carry on.
The analogy that can be used is like a marriage. I don't think anyone falls into a relationship that just lasts. It takes effort and discipline on both sides, and a sheer effort of will sometimes to overcome natural crankiness or a natural sense to be nasty to each other. I think that's part of the discipline that it takes for us.
Neil Peart's daughter Selena died in a car crash in August 1997. A year later, his wife, Jackie Taylor, passed away from cancer. In solidarity with Neil, Geddy and Alex refused to guarantee the future of the band, telling reporters and fans that their friend's well-being was the priority.
I mean, we tried to be there for him as much as he needed us, and as his family did, and, we're part of his extended family, I guess. And he's a pretty solitary guy, and he handled a lot of it on his own, but not all of it. And, life is so unpredictable that he's found himself with someone new suddenly. And, it's kind of heaven sent.
Still to come on the story of Rush.
None of us had any experience with such a tragedy.
And it was so devastating to us, as well as him, that it took our breath away, it took our spirit away.
After a 5-year absence, Rush released their 17th studio recording in May 2002, the 13-track disc, Vapor Trails.
I love the choice for the first single and the placement of it on the record in terms of sequencing, because you really do announce your arrival.
Yeah, it didn't start out that way because we had no idea that song would end up the way it did, but once we had a vision of how that song was going to be, it soon became clear that that was an important statement to make. You know, like we're back and we're celebrating something here, and especially with Neil starting it off, you know, and the fury of him playing just was just the right thing to do.
Yeah, completely appropriate.
Was there ever a question after his life crisis is that there would never be another Rush record?
Oh, sure. Who knew? It's not something that you can really predict. You know? We didn't know. You know.
None of us had any experience with such a tragedy.
And it was so devastating to us, as well as him, that it took our breath away, it took our spirit away, and nobody knew that we could get back together and celebrate something again. And music is celebration in a large way, I think. Music is about spirit, especially rock music. It's about spirit. And when your spirit is taken away in a situation like that, there's no way of predicting its return. And so as a result, we, you know, chose to do what we should do and be the best pals we could be to him, and, you know, hope that he would recover as a person and as our friend. And then if, you know, if there was a time that we were going to be Rush again, then that would be fine, you know. But if there wasn't, then that would be fine too.
What was the first line of discussions?
We heard from Neil that he was ready to talk about going back to work, and we arranged to get together. And
he referred to it as work?
Well, I think the phrase that he used was, I think it's time for me to seek some gainful employment. Which I thought boded well for the future because it was so funny.
And we got together and we just talked about things. It was a very kind of loose meeting. It probably took place about 6 months before we started working on the record. Geddy was in the middle of working on My Favorite Headache. We spent a lot of time just talking. The first couple of weeks, I don't think we played a single note. We just talked a lot. And very slowly we got into the whole, you know, machine.
It was a very interesting atmosphere when we first got together, you know. It was like we were all so pleased to be with each other. And, you know, as soon as you get the three of us together, it's not long before stupid jokes start flying, you know, and we start kibitzing with each other. And that was so pleasant and so familiar, you know. It was, at the same time, there was an emotional quotient that was kind of in the air and not very far from the surface. And I think it was the residue of all the difficulties. And at the same time, there was the familiarity of, oh my God, how many times have we done this before? Can we actually make any meaningful music together anymore after all this time?
But inevitably, to answer your own question, you know, yes.
Yeah, yes is the answer. The morning says the answer is yes. It took time, but we got to a point where suddenly we started to feed off each other, and boy, that was a glorious feeling. Partly out of frustration of the belief that you haven't quite nailed it yet. There seems still to be something to nail. I always feel like I'm getting better, and I think the other guys feel that way too. Whatever the last work was, feels somehow like this is pretty good, I like it, but I didn't quite get it right, you know.
You would think you've gotten it right by now.
No, I know, that's how stupid we are.
I don't think we want to get it
We
right.
just can't figure it out.